Today at T-Mobile, I'm joined by a special co-anchor.
What up, everybody? It's your boy, Big Snoop Deal Double G.
Snoop, where can people go to find great deals?
Head to T-Mobile.com and get 4 iPhone 16s with Apple Intelligence on us, plus 4 lines for $25.
That's quite a deal, Snoop. And when you switch to T-Mobile, you can save versus the other big guys' comparable plans plus streaming.
Respect. We up out of here.
See how you can save on wireless and streaming versus the other big guys at T-Mobile.com/switch. Apple Intelligence requires iOS 18.1 or later.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Wonder-working power in the precious...
Incredible as they seem, are not the results of mass hysteria.
You may wish to adjust the dial. You're currently tuned into the wrong station. When they found Clade with news of the massacre, she was sitting at the edge of her sister's bed in the westernmost wing of the hospital, half asleep from the ping and mutter of the machines keeping Bessa alive. A faint frown wrinkled her forehead, the old survivor's guilt. She was a big woman, with sun-freckled skin and canvas sleeves rolled tight around her forearms. The old hospital chair was taut under her weight. But her sister had grown so frail she could have floated through the ceiling. Heavy boots rang in the hall outside. Clade lifted her head. Bessa's eyes flickered. "Clade? I'm right here." She reached out, took her sister's cool fingers. They were holding hands like this when Breck appeared at the door. Clade. He was a small man, compact, professional. The mustache suited him. Like Clade, he was dressed in practical canvas, with a Z-gun heavy at his hip. Some instinct in him was straining to salute, even though they didn't do things that way in the commune. "There's something you gotta come and see." Clade glanced at Bessa, but her big sister just smiled. She had the saintly look of someone on the edge of heaven. "Go, Clade. The commune needs you." It was a clear night. The red harvest moon hung low against a star-burnt purple sky, against black conifers. The hove whined softly as it carried them over rough ground. "You might want to prepare yourself," Breck told her. "It's bad. Trust me," Clade told him. "I'm prepared." Lights blazed in the dark below. They were coming up on the Lawson freehold, and from up here she could just make out the silhouettes of a few of her warrior society. Goran and Ilum, she thought, by the shape of them. They were standing on either side of the open door, waving up at the hove. As Breck brought the vehicle down, Clade could tell from their faces he'd meant what he said about it being bad. Goran's face was paper. There was a bit of vomit on his jacket. Ilum was white-lipped and nailed down tight. "Any sign of it?" she asked them, swinging down from the running board. "All quiet," Ilum said. "Stay sharp anyway." Clade hesitated by the door and put a hand on Goran's shoulder. "You okay?" He forced himself to nod. "It's bad in there, Clade." She squeezed and said nothing, then ducked under the lintel. Inside Lawson Freehold, she found a slaughterhouse. The blood was bright and surreal in the hard lights. In some places it pooled a half-inch deep. Someone was lying across the kitchen in 3 separate pieces. It took her a few moments to recognize Archer Lawson. Jesus. The word slipped out on its own. Her old school friend was staring up at the lights with an expression of surprise. His face was as red as Jupiter's. Nearby, the baby lay dead as well. Clade forced herself to look. She told herself that at least it had been quick. How did whatever it was get in? Glass door. Breck's voice was clipped and precise behind her. She crunched into the next room, through broken glass and bits of bone, and found the glass door yawning on the woodland night. She put one hand on the chrome grip of her Zed and stepped forward to where Archer must have been standing when whatever it was came through the door and hit him. The woods were so black you never would have seen what was about to kill you until it was already exploding through the glass. Then, the final seconds, everything a disoriented blur, the red, the pain, the baby screaming, and Sasha. She shut her eyes. She knew Sasha, too. "Where's Sasha, Lawson?" By way of answer, Breck stepped up beside her, one hand following a trail of blood which led out through the broken glass. He fell still with that one hand pointing into the black woods. "You think she's still alive?" Goran was back by the kitchen door. Clade didn't answer. She shouldered through the broken glass and out into night. There was more blood out there, puddled black in the torn turf. "How many liters can a person lose before they die?" she asked Breck. 2, 2.5. She could almost hear the small man shrug behind her. They both knew. Less than this. It was past the end of first watch by the time they arrived back at Commune. Lights were on over at Clade's house, and the Warrior Society were gathered outside, fueling up on coffee substitute. Up on the hill, lights were blazing from the open double doors of the community center, and Saganianza's frozen breath caught the glow as she waited there. Her hands were clasped tight around old arms. "Clade!" Her thin voice crackled as she raised one hand. "Emergency meeting. Committee'd love for you to join." Clade turned aside reluctantly. "Get 'em ready, Breck." She meant the Warrior Society. "I want to be back out there in 30. "Yes, sir." Then he corrected himself. "Yes, Clade." She clapped him on the shoulder, then trudged up the hill. "Just as long as it doesn't take too long, Skan," she called up to the old woman. "Work to do before the end of second watch." "Well, you know how these things go, Clade. Committee takes the time it needs." Skan welcomed the big woman with an outstretched arm and followed her through the chipped blue doors. "How are you, Clade? Was it bad out there?" "Real bad. But I'm good." "Well, if you're ever not, you know my door is open." "Thanks, Skan. But like I said, I am." "Coffee? Is it real? What is this, Christmas? Of course not. Then I'll pass, thanks." Under harsh fluorescence, the meeting was an hour or more old already, with reps from some 24 interests and families present. Yasso from Riverwork had the floor, and he was staring up the ceiling, counting on his fingers as he spoke. 15 weirs in that stretch of watershed. We're probably looking at, ballpark, 180 person-hours to get that production up and running someplace else. "You won't have to," said Clade, taking an empty chair across from him. "We're going to kill the damn thing." Silence. Saganianza quietly took a seat next to Clade. "Well, that brings us to the question, doesn't it?" Gashra, the speaker, stepped smoothly into the pause. She was a put-together woman, never without a tablet and clipboard. What is our course of action here? Who's taking point? Warrior Society, said Clade. It's an outside threat. Our jurisdiction. I don't think that's correct. Armin spoke up from across the room. He was a scrawny man, the rep from ECO. He had a weathered face and dressed in baggy cargos. We're looking at a large predator. That's our area. Unless the creature's an atavism, said Clade. Omalayo from the lab jumped in. But that would be our area of expertise, using the same protocols ECO would use for an apex, Armin concluded. Everyone turned back to Clade for her response. It took her a moment. Depending on the nature of the atavism, she managed at last. Well, do we have evidence to suggest it's an unusual atavism? Said Omalayo. Technological in any way? Clade couldn't bring herself to lie to committee. There was proof of claws and teeth and muscle, some scraps of black fur. That was all. So she pivoted. Archelauzin is dead. So's the baby. Sasha's unaccounted for. Gashra reversed the tablet in her hand. She had Clade's own initial report on screen, filed from the hub a half hour earlier. You said yourself that she was dead, Clade. Likely dead. But if there's a chance she made it, not with the blood I'm seeing in these stills. Omalayo's face turned gray as she swiped through a tablet of her own. Look. Clade shoved back her chair and stood. This creature came into our community, slaughtered 3 of our own. Are we going to let it get away with that? Once more, an uncomfortable silence. Clade. Armin's voice softened. That kind of argument is exactly why this should fall on ECO. Whatever we're dealing with here, it's an animal, not an antagonist. Whatever it's doing because of its nature. Justice and vengeance just aren't at play. Clade's jaw worked. But then a soft touch at her elbow surprised her. Scanianza. Why don't you tell us your plan, Clade? Then we'll hear what ECO says and put it to a vote. Clade felt a rush of gratitude. The old woman's voice counted for a lot, even though her position didn't hold a vote. Well, simple. We'll put together a posse, hunt the damn thing down, bring back Sasha's body for a decent burial, and turn its pelt into a rug for this hall. That brought a few chuckles. Even Gashra's mouth slanted. Okay, the chairwoman said. Armin, Omalayo, your turn. Omalayo yielded to Armin with a gesture. The scrawny man rose, produced a ject from his pocket, and waved a hand across its sensor to activate a light screen. Same as any large predator, he said. Outside commune, we have a perimeter of signal fencing. Here. He traced out a circle of red pins. But several clicks past that, we've got an outer layer of latent fencing, just in case of situations like this. These blue pins, maintained monthly so we know they're working. We flicked that outer fencing on as soon as the alarm came in, so we're highly confident the predator is contained somewhere in this circle. You mean you trapped it in here with us? Said Clade. Armin blinked. No. We trapped it in this donut out here. We're all safe here, in the donut hole. Scanianza chuckled. My kind of metaphor. So tomorrow, Armin went on, we head out and install a few more signal posts. Here, 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 and here. Divide the circle into quadrants. And we add one more row of fence posts. Here. Each day, we move that final row a few more 100 meters clockwise until we've cleared the quadrant or cornered the predator. Rinse and repeat. And then? Said Clade. Armin shrugged. Then we've got it fenced in. We can either leave it there or relocate it, depending what we're dealing with, what's ecologically responsible. What about the other freeholds, the ones outside the donut hole? He shrugged. I'm already evacuating. Fire and rescue's on it. That's why Ezra isn't here. Clade looked around in disbelief. And you're all fine with this idea? Gashra shrugged. Seems reasonable to me. Everyone else? Nods. Murmurs of assent. Catch and release. Clade stood. This thing's tasted human blood. You're just gonna let it run loose somewhere? Clade. Scanianza lowered her voice. I think we'd all feel good to go out and get this thing that got the lozenge. But that's not how we make decisions here. We go by what does the most good and the least harm. And what about community safety? The community is safe, said Gashra. Not, Clade insisted, as long as that thing's out there. She gathered her coat, pushed her chair out of the way. You all do what you like, but this is a mistake. I'm out. Clade, said Armin, but she was already halfway to the door. Clade, come back, said Scanianza. Let her go, said Gashra. We've got more important things to think about before we break. A moment later, Clade was jogging down the hill, motioning to Breck for silence. Gather the troops and pull the gate, she muttered. We're going on a monster hunt. Out under dark pines, and with the golden flicker of the commune's fence behind them, well behind them, the warrior society stepped silent through fallen needles, or else clung to the sides of murmuring hubs. They didn't say much, some because they were stalking prey, others because the dark woods scared them, and others because they suspected in their hearts that Clade had lied to them, that this sortie went against the commune's will. At the front, Clade and Breck were muttering about strategy. Two groups. Clade was carrying a small ject. A map of the countryside hung ghostly on the air before her. I'll take my team up to Lawson and follow its tracks from there. You lead yours cross-country, this way. So if we flush the monster out, it runs right into your guns. And then, Breck's voice was a bare whisper. Barbecue it. Won't Eco have something to say? Clade shrugged, and the non-answer widened Breck's eyes. It took him a moment to form his next question, which he did in the softest possible voice, barely moving his lips. Commune didn't sign off on this, did they, Clade? Clade said nothing. When she didn't, Breck laughed softly and shook his head. Well, sir, it's about time. Thanks. The small man pulled back, clicking his cheek, making broad gestures through the gloom. Hubs 3 and 4, teams gray, white, and black. On me. The company divided. Two streams forked in the darkness, and Clade led her section up country toward the freehold, toward whatever waited in the woods. They reached Lawson Freehold just after 4 p.m. It was the middle of second watch, halfway through the 80-hour night, and the temperature was dropping close to zero. Their breath wreathed them in fog. The small lights of their Zeds and battery packs came hazy through the darkness. Lawson's lights were black by now, the windows dark, the bodies back on a slab at commune. Inside, the blood would be congealed by now, and lapped at gently by the creatures of the night. This way. Clade led her 3 teams through the outbuildings, keeping as far from the house as possible. Too many of her people were green. She didn't want them spooked by all the blood. There was a light frost on the grass. Their boots crunched softly, and Hubs 1 and 2 were barely louder than the midnight breeze. The trail was easy enough to pick up when they reached the freehold's edge. Black blood and churned earth, broken branches stark in the dim red beams of torches. Here and there the occasional sparkle of broken glass. They followed into the lowering trees for about a click before the trail of blood ran out. By then, Ilum had taken point. The bloody beam of her torch probed the forest floor. She was their best tracker. She'd come over from Eco, and the sudden murmur of owls in the branches above didn't bother her. She led them deeper through the sighing woods. Did time pass strangely? It seemed even less consistent than it always did during their planet's 3-day nights. Maybe it was the adrenaline, the slow, bright chemical drip. Nothing felt quite real, but everything felt alive. The Zed was heavy in her hand, chrome and curved, with its soft grip of chrome and brown shagreen. It warmed her to the touch like the warmth of a human hand. The weight of a gun was soft ecstasy. It longed to be used. She longed to use it. When the moon reached its zenith, her cool light found them halfway up an escarpment overlooking the freehold. The troops were resting, with their backs against the cold chrome of the hubs, and their breath like kettle steam as they spoke in low voices. Ilum and Clade stood apart at the head of the line. I can already tell the tracks are leading up to that ridge. Ilum gestured along the escarpment. Limestone karst. We'll find caves up there, and running water. If I was an apex predator, that's where I'd hang out. Clade grunted. There's something else up there. Ruins. Even in the dark, Ilum's glance was sharp and direct. That settles it then. We're dealing with an atavism, not a normal predator. Clade glanced down toward the darkness of the freehold. Nothing normal does what we saw at Lawson. When they reached the heights, the moon had just begun to sink. Everyone was footsore and cold, and now and then Clade caught muttered snatches of rumor from the troopers behind. Everyone knew they were hunting an atavism by now, but what that meant was liquid in their minds. Now it had armor plates, now human intelligence, now it was atom-powered. Someone had started calling it the Bear, and after half an hour the name had stuck. She could smell their morale fading like a perfume on the air. They didn't want to catch the atavism anymore, but that only made her more desperate to catch it. How long since they'd seen a drop of blood? Sasha was a small woman. She only had so much to bleed. They wouldn't be finding her alive. It was a guarantee by now, and the weight of that knowledge fell heavy on Clade's shoulders. She'd used the death. Someone she knew, someone who had been real to her. She felt sick with herself. But then Ilum's gloved fist snapped up. Halt! Her whisper had an edge. She opened eject. Its dim gold blur changed colors as she toggled through the view modes. There's something up ahead. Warm-blooded. Alive. It's something big. Clade turned to her troops. They were weary shadows in the gloom, but the nearness of danger squared them, sharpened them. Spread out. She controlled her voice. 2 by 2, forefinger on the left flank, hubs on the center and right. Ilum, you've got the far end. At her order, they advanced down to the soft darkness of jack pines. The land here was scooped away into a shallow dish some several hundred meters long. It was a ruin. Under the thin soil and snarled roots lay a long buried edifice of steel. Here and there extrusions of imperishable chrome gushed up along the gnarled trees, twisted, liquid, like frozen water springs. Whatever they were, their mundane functions were stained with mystery by long immersion in the dark of time. Now and then an old witchlight would glimmer dimly from deep recesses in the chrome, and it was by these wear-lights that the staggered line crept slowly for the center of the bowl. Clade's warrior society were far from the best soldiers in the void, but what doctrine or technology they lacked, they made up for just a little in their woodcraft. Clade's earpiece crackled. Ilum murmured in her ear, We're right on top of it. I can't see anything. It's too dark. By now, the moon had set beyond the crater's rim. It's right at your end of the line, 15 meters out. Clade's heart jumped into her throat. Copy. Bring Gold Team around. L-shaped ambush. Enfilade and defilade. Copy. Do you have eyes yet? Clade, do you have a visual? Clade was dumb. What she'd taken for mere darkness up ahead was the shadow under a bulge of steel which arced up from the buried structure like a dragon's back. In the hollow underneath it, a few primeval lights still glowed, and while Ilum muttered in Clade's ear, one of those diodes rallied with a last, unexpected brilliance, casting its orange pallor across the lines of an ashen face. Sasha. She was as beautiful and small as Clade remembered, but now her limbs were curled underneath her like a spider on the windowsill. She stared in silence. Ilum's anxious voice crackled again, and Clade noticed something strange. Something was growing from the pale flesh beneath Sasha's torn clothes. Something like a tree root, or set of tree roots. They were black and fleshy, but furred or feathered with a kind of silken down. And as she followed these extrusions into darkness, two of those fading diodes blinked. And she realized they weren't diodes after all. They were the black starred eyes of some great creature waiting in the darkness. Oh. Then it boiled up like a black wave, and its teeth were like jet knives, and its noise was an almost human sort of scream. She had the sense of huge bulk and black down and heavy claws, but the head was earless, and the eyes dead stars, and the movement more like that of a great snake or eel than anything ursine. It fell forward from the darkness, screaming as she screamed back, and fired bolts of blazing gold from the Zed gun suddenly in her hand. The light ripped through its body like smoke, casting no glow on the utter black fur. Then she threw herself aside as the rest of her section opened fire, and the golden light exploded through the tree trunks. Timber groaned. Hand-length splinters hurtled through the air, and the trees veered, but the bear changed direction like a swarm of birds and poured straight through Ilum's enfilade, smashing aside the hub like a child's wagon. Then it was gone. Silence fell, except for all the screaming, which played on like one instrument when all the rest of the orchestra has fallen mute. A few minutes later, more gunfire echoed softly over the next hill, and with it, the distant flash of golden light. The Wrong Station is made possible with the generous support of our listeners on Patreon. Visit today at patreon.com/thewrongstation. You can also support us by leaving a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever it is you tune into the show. This week's episode, Existential Threat Part 1, was written by Alexander Saxton and performed by Anthony Botello. Thank you to Rochelle Osborne, Lemon Punk, Nasheen Nazir, Deidre Cooley, Gilles Mont, Darren Elquist, Abdelrahman El Gabardi, Justin Riley, and Jeffrey M. for helping us keep the lights, well, off. The Wrong Station is co-produced by Alexander Saxton, Anthony Botello, and Jacob Duarte Spiel, with music composed and performed by Alon Citron, and arranged for the viola and performed by Viola Schmidt. You can follow The Wrong Station on social media, @The Wrong Station, and email us at thewrongstation@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you for listening.